In Chapter 7 we'll be modelling a ninja's shoes, known in Japan as tabi. We once again start off right where we left off in the previous chapter. And our legs still have mirror turned off in our view, so I'll just turn that back on. And now I'm going to turn on my background image and load in a new image, which will be a side view outline of our tabi. I'm going to make a plane here and just place it at the bottom of the foot in side view from reference, and that will give me an indication of where to place the bottom of my tabi reference. In the other window I'll also add a new background image, which is the top outline. I only need to line up with the very top and bottom lines here, so it doesn't matter where it is on the x-axis, left and right. But I'll place it basically as close as I can to the middle of the grid. Now again, I'll just snap the cursor to the middle of the grid, and here's some reference that I use for the tabi. It's a bit more of a modern look, since I mean our character design does have night vision goggles, so. And there's a 3/4 angle shot as well of the same boot. We'll start off by modeling the sole. I moved that reference plate to layer 20 just to get it out of the way, and I added a new plane object here. Now I'll just scale it out along the y-axis to stretch it at the length of our sole. And then I'll add a loop cut in the middle and roll the scroll wheel until I have about 8 cuts. And you can also just type the number 8 when you see those purple lines appear. From there I'll just start moving up and down the vertices, and the more the mesh curves around, the more vertices you're going to need in that area. So especially near the top and bottom, I'm pushing some of the vertices a bit closer to each other. I'll now go into edge selection mode, select these 3 bottom edges and delete them. And with the 2 dead end vertices, I'll just begin extruding them both at the same time and scaling them closer to each other. And then move them to form the shape of the toe crease there. And finally just join them with F to create an edge. So what you have are these faced areas here, and then a gap at the front around the toe area. Then in side view, I'm just making an extrusion upward and rotating so that the heel side is a little bit higher. There's also a face that is formed on the inside here. I can just delete that with X and delete faces. I'll now box select this loop here and move it back towards the part of the sole that drops down. I'll then switch my selection to faces with Control Tab. And then down here I'm going to turn on only select visible vertices. While in edit mode, that box will show up, and you can turn it on, and that will basically hide any vertices that are behind another face. I'll select these 3 faces at the back and delete with X, and then I'm left with these 3 faces in the middle where I'll add 2 loop cuts. I'll select the middle row of vertices of faces. I'll then match the vertices to the top of my side outline. And again, looking at my reference in my external monitor that I have up, I can just work out how to make these vertices higher or lower to form the top area of the tabi. I've also extruded these back 5 edges upward to start forming the back of the heel. And the very back 2 vertices I'll push a bit closer together to form something in the shape of the Achilles heel. And then I'll join the faces together between the 2 extrusions that I made. I'll make a loop cut close to the bottom of the sole. And I'll move the vertices up higher towards the tip of the toes, and then down lower as we come back towards the back of the heel. And this will become the area that we will extrude outward to form the rubber sole bottom of the shoe that will be visible. I'll then match the bottom vertices to the shape I'd like to form the bottom of the tabi. Usually lifting a little bit near the toe area and then flattening out as we come to the bottom area of the foot. I'm also keeping in mind to have a little dip upward in the middle there. I'll add a subsurf modifier, take the subdivisions to 2, I can hit Control up arrow just to change my window to full screen. And then I'm just going to add these two faces here at the top of the toes, merge these two vertices together, and also merge at the tip of the toes. I'll now just work my way around. The very crease of the toes can make a face with the middle vertices. And again, I'll just join two faces over the big toe, and again merge on either side. I'll push those vertices up to give the toes a bit of a smoother shape, so that it's not too flat at the top and more natural. And then we have our basic feel of our shoe. Again, now I'll just make some changes that I can see what my shape looks like in subsurf mode. And from there I'll work a little bit more on the bottom of the sole. Now I'm making an extrusion with all of these faces that have been filled in. I'll delete the edge near the toes that remains there, that goes all the way across. And then I'll just scale all of these bottom vertices along the z-axis so that they are flat. I'll delete the face at the bottom, at the back of the heel, add 2 loop cuts, extrude out the 2 vertices, and then I can make 3 quad vertices all the way around. Now this area gets a little bit tricky to fill in with quads. It might take a bit of experimenting, but I'm going with basically the same method as the top. I'll add some faces generally, and then add a loop cut in the middle, and decide if I need to merge any vertices at the tip of the toe. At the bottom here I decide to not merge and just have a diamond quad. And that will almost act as a bit of a beveling feel, so that the bottom of the toes look a bit flatter, like the sole of the foot. Now I've just extruded these 2 vertices at the very bottom of the crease of the 2 toes, so that I can add some more quads that come out almost a bit like a spider web. And this area remains. I've got 6 vertices here, so of course that means I can make 2 quads quite easily out of it. So there we have the bottom of the tabi filled in, and it's really starting to take shape and look like something now. I'll just take these middle vertices here, and so that there isn't too much of a gap, I'll just scale them. And if I scale past the middle point and keep going, you'll see that it will begin to scale in the minus. So taking advantage of that, I can make the vertices crisscross over each other and give the feeling that they're squishing together. I'm again looking at my reference just to do things like push in underneath the inside of the foot here. You'll notice that a lot of shoes kind of have this bit that rolls out on the inside and then tucks under as you come down to the sole of the foot. So that will help just get the shape a bit more realistic and not look too symmetrical. So there we filled in the whole part of the shoe, and we can begin working on some more details. Firstly, I'll just take all of these vertices and shift them across a bit more so that we don't want the big toe area and all of the remaining toes part of the tabi to look too much similar, or the same size. I'll then just Alt Control right click, select this entire lower face loop, and then just hit C and left click drag along to select all of the bottom vertices that remain of the sole of the foot. So we've got basically that whole bottom area of vertices selected. I'll deselect just these vertices on the inside of the toes, just as you can see here. So we've got these corners that appear just before the toes meet, and I'm going to hit extrude and just extrude outward with Alt S to some amount. And what that gives us is something like a rubber sole that has been molded onto the bottom of the shoe. I might come in and push these corners a little bit closer to each other. And I can even also point them out a little bit to give the look of a sharper edge. I'll then select these vertices that you see at the bottom of the sole, and I'll just move them down a bit to add a bit of padding around the heeler area and the front of the foot. And I can also play around with the rolling effect as the rubber sole arcs upward towards the tips of the toes. And by playing with the vertices of these loops here, the seam of the rubber sole, I can just customize the shape of it to something that looks nice and has a nice design. So I'm pretty happy with that. I like the look of the rubber seam as it arcs up and downward, a bit like some sneakers that you see here and there. And I'd say that shape is looking pretty good. From this point we can move into adding some details and guards for the feet. I'll select these 9 faces here and duplicate them. I'll then press P to separate them to another object and just go into that object. I'll give it its own material, and I'll just make the material a little bit darker than our tabi so that again I can distinguish between the two. This will form a guard similar to our hand guard that we modeled. Now as I'm recording this, I'm going to be using a new modifier that's just been added called the solidify modifier. If I add it like so and just press the up arrow to bring it to the top of the modifier stack, and then just change the thickness factor, you'll see that it automatically creates a thickness amount to the object. And this is based on the object normals. So this saves us extruding out and adding beveled edges like we had earlier. Both ways are good to know, and this is a bit more of a shortcut, but in some cases for simple meshes it can be quite handy. By changing the inner, outer and rim sliders, that will bevel the different edges to the amount specified. I can also come in, switch to vertice selection, and by moving the vertices around, I can manipulate the shape and the way that the thickness reacts. And I'll play with the general shape at this basic stage. That's looking pretty good for now, so I'll move on to adding some more details. I wanted to add a few more trims and such to the tabi, and after Googling I found this image. It's a little bit ugly, but the design of the straps I think we can use. So I'll aim to create something similar with our tabi here. I'll select these faces, coming out from the center of the crease of the toes, and all the way around the side of our tabi here, and around the back. I'll duplicate again, separate by selection, and I'll link the materials to our guard so that it's the same material. I'll then add solidifier to that object, change the thickness to a nice amount, I can then move the vertices and spread them out a bit to give the appearance that it's the material's getting quite squished in there between the toes, and that will give it some thickness. And I might just move these vertices down so that this side trim doesn't hog the whole area. And I kind of like how it comes up higher above the heel here. So I imagine maybe this is some type of leather overlay that just, you know, its practical excuse can be that it's there just for some extra protection. But really it's there just for design. And I can play around with pushing some of these vertices back and causing a sort of arc that pushes backwards and then comes to a point at the front with an acute angle. And I've just made another edge loop cut in the middle to puff out that area. So with that done, I'll just come in and select the foot guard that we modeled first, and then I'm going to hit apply on its solidify modifier to apply that. I'll also apply the subsurf modifier. So with no modifiers left, I'll re-add a subsurf modifier with a level of 1. So we've got this higher density mesh, and I'm just going to come in and shift select all of the top vertices here, except for that very back row and the front row. With all those selected, I'll extrude, right click to cancel the auto move, and scale inward just a tad. So once again we have this outline loop, and by just selecting that face loop I can extrude inward, and just like the previous belt and handguard, we've got this trim that comes around the edge. And if some of the vertices are a little bit far away from the edge, I can just move them manually. Now I'll select the other detail leather type mesh here. I'll apply its solidify and just take the subsurf down to 1 and apply that. I'll add another subsurf modifier again to that one. And I'm just going to select these two face loops with Control Alt, right click. And I'll just deselect these front faces. I'll also shift select these two face loops that come across the front and just delete the edge faces again. And then I'll just come in and carefully select all of the faces along the front as well. So basically we've got all of the faces selected except for the trim around the side. At that point I'll extrude and then Alt S scale inward. And I can hit smooth just to help even out the vertices. And then we have a similar trim on both objects. Now I'm going to come in and select all of the rubber sole area of our original tabi mesh. I'll press the plus icon twice to add two materials, at which point I'll add material 003 to 1, and I've just hit apply there with this vertices selected so that those vertices show that material. And I'll change the other one to material 2, and that will give all the other vertices the other material. I've just joined all of my tabi objects together, and then I'll bring back all layers except for layer 20. In the search spacebar menu, I'll type apply and then just apply rotation. I'll then move all of the vertices across and place it underneath the left leg. Rotate on the Z-axis a little bit just to make the stance a little more natural, the default stance. I'll select the pants, Shift S, and cursor to selection. I'll then select the tabi object, and in spacebar menu, type set origin, and set object origin to 3D cursor. So now we've got the object center in the middle. I can add a mirror modifier, and then we'll perfectly form 2 tabi on either side. And it looks really good. But we've still got the bandages intersecting right through the tabi. So now with the tabi in place, I can come in and use a bit of proportional editing to push and pull the bandages and get them to wrap around our tabi. And also press against it so that there's no gap showing. Oh, I'm pretty happy with those tabi. And just by mixing a couple of designs together, we have something that looks pretty good. And I was able to take some creative license. So now let's move on to some of the details.